So, hello and welcome to Horse Illustrated's webinar series. My name is Mary Cage. I am the digital manager here at Horse Illustrated, so I'll be your host today. And of course, our guests are Jason and Bronwyn Irwin. So, Jason and Bronwyn, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So just a quick rundown before we get started of how this will work is I'm going to run through some questions on behalf of Horse Illustrated that Jason and Bronwyn will then answer, and then we'll open up the floor to you guys as an audience. So you should see a little icon on your screen that says Q&A. That's where you'll type in any questions you have for them. You can wait until we get to that portion, or if you think of something throughout the first part of the webinar, feel free to submit it, and then I'll moderate those when we get to them, and we'll get through as many as we have time for. But other than that, we'll go ahead and jump in. Just to kind of introduce Jason and Bronwyn real quick, they are a husband and wife duo based out of Canada, but they teach clinics and demos all across North America, about 25 a year at events like Equine Affair, Main Event, the Western States Horse Expo, and they really cover a wide variety of topics, colt starting, liberty, problem solving, all sorts of good stuff. And of course, they have their own TV show that airs on the Cowboy Channel Canada and RFD TV Canada called The Horse Trainers. And you guys even appeared on Canada's Got Talent with your Liberty and Trick horses. So lots of fun stuff, and obviously plenty to learn from you guys today. So I think this will be a great time for everybody to learn and to kind of learn more about you guys as well. So the question I always like to ask first to start off with our guest is if you can tell us how you very first fell in love with horses.
Well, for me, I don't remember when I first really got into them, just because it's always been a part of my life. So ever since I was a little kid, we had horses, and it was just something I was very, very drawn to. And I find some people, it's just not for them, and other people, they're okay with them, and other people, it's just for some reason becomes their lifetime passion, and they're just really drawn to them. And I think I fit into that category. So I started riding when I was a little wee kid, and then I starting colts when I was about 12, 13 years old, and then really went to town from there. So it's just always been a very big part of my life.
And to be honest, I'm about the same answer, as far as I'm not really sure there was an exact moment that I really loved horses. I honestly just have always loved horses since I was little. And I was fortunate enough that my parents, when I was 7, put me into riding lessons during the summertime. So I got to fulfill that passion. But I just love the look of them. I guess I probably had seen them in movies when I was a kid and seen them running fast and jumping things. And so it just really intrigued me. And just they feel like kind of a magical animal, I guess, when you're a kid. And so I just always had a passion for horses and really that lifestyle too.
Absolutely. And as any of us horse people know, once it's in your blood, once you've been bitten by the bug, there's really not any hope of getting rid of that. And why would you? So when did you know that you wanted to take that love for horses and turn it into a career?
Well, I probably always wanted to. I guess I just wasn't sure how exactly I would do that as my full-time career. So I sort of assumed horses would be a part-time thing for me. I thought I would maybe start some horses on the side and raise a few and maybe do that type of thing. But just really doors kept opening as I kept going down that path. And then I kept looking for more opportunity, and it kept getting bigger and bigger. So I was originally going to probably farm and then have horses as my sideline, but I'm really not that interested in farming. And I think it was just my effort and my desire was always pretty clear to be in one area. So I just went farther and farther with it. So I'm happy I went that route. It's definitely not the easiest thing in the world. But so again, I guess it all comes back to ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to make it my career.
Sure.
I think I just got into it actually in a bit of a different way, because I did go to university and get a full-time job as a radiation therapist in the beginning. And I was really in love with biology and medicine and that kind of stuff. So I really enjoyed like sciences and things like that. So I figured I was going to work in that field and have horses as my hobby or my side lifestyle, I guess.
Yeah.
And then when Jason and I got married and I moved up here, the radiation therapy department is very far from where we are located now. So I had to quit that. And when Jason started doing clinics, well, I started coaching lessons up here when I first came up to this area, but then Jason started doing clinics. And so then it just flowed naturally for me to get into it as well on a full-time basis. So it's kind of, I guess, a different way of getting into it. Even though I had dreamed of having a horse business when I was a kid,
Sure.
I just always thought that do your business and then have your horses as your fun, so. But
Yeah.
now they're our fun and our business.
Yeah, how cool it was able to work out that way, and that way they can be your whole life basically. But as we touched on, you guys, cover a wide variety. You teach clinics, lessons, demos, you compete, things like that. And you even breed horses. So can you kind of dive into and kind of explain to the audience your various focuses within the equine industry?
Sure. So I guess our focus is everything. It's pretty hard to narrow down. So with the clinics, we do a lot of different clinics every year on a wide variety of topics. So we'll do colt starting courses, livery training clinics, a lot of horsemanship and problem solving, that type of thing. So all those are where we will go to a host farm and teach a group of people. And then Bronwyn does the lessons as well. And then we're also involved in my family's business, which is North Star Livestock, which is a quarter horse operation. So we have a lot of quarter horses that we raise here. And then we train horses as well with the TV show. We've been doing that now for, I guess, 9 seasons, and we're about to start season 10 as well. And then kind of like you touched on earlier, we go to a lot of the different horse expos, and that's something that we really enjoy. It gives us an excuse to travel and see a lot of new places and meet a lot of new people. And then besides that, we write for magazines, and we really just cover a pretty wide range of things, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about how often you go to these different clinics and expos, and that's a big part of your business. And obviously, same with the TV show. Just a lot of educational aspects are built in to your business and what you do. But when it comes to those clinics and expos, maybe for people who have never been to one, who've never sat through a demo or anything like that, if you had to kind of give an elevator pitch of why someone should attend a clinic, what do you think is beneficial for an audience member?
Well, I think one of the main things I would say is we really try to be practical. So our clinics, I think we break it down into such a way that people can easily understand what we're going for. And not to backtrack too much, but I used to train a lot of horses that we would raise, or we would either buy them and then bring them up and I would train them and we would sell them. So I had to kind of put together a training program that was very practical, that would get results that everybody could get along with. And we've really tried to mix that into our clinic business. We try to have it where here's a logical series of steps that nearly anybody could follow to get their horse to either do X, Y, Z, or to fix a particular problem. So we really, really try to break it down and make it very user friendly. And I feel like that's something that I won't say it's lacking, but a lot of people that have been in our clinics say they really appreciate that. I think I like to talk about the philosophy of horse training and stuff like that as well. But sometimes you can get so philosophical that you forget to give them something to actually go home and work with. So I think that's a pretty big part of what we offer.
And then just on the expo side, being a little bit different than a clinic, that we usually work with multiple groups of people in a day to teach different clinics. And so we're just highlighting kind of different programs that we offer as clinics. But the thing about the expos that is nice is you get a ton of clinicians in one spot. So it's very hard to get these clinicians from all around the world in one area. And if you're near a place where they offer an expo, I totally recommend to go, because you'll see people that, you just normally probably wouldn't run into down the road. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Our team was just at Equine Affair this past weekend, and the schedule was packed full of various horsemen and horsewomen. And like you said, you kind of zero in on a specific topic. So maybe if you find something that's like, hey, I need to work on that with my horse, perfect. You've got however long of an allotted time to sit in there and learn from a professional. So, I think they're a really great opportunity. And that's a great point about expos, is there's so many different things you can learn from instead of just one specific thing. Jason, you kind of touched on some background in colt starting, and that has led to you competing in a few colt starting competitions. So what do you enjoy about those? And do you kind of learn something new each time you do one?
Oh, definitely. I always say though, the part that I enjoy about them is when it's over, because during them, I feel like I'm racking my brain the whole time because there's only so much time allotted to work with a young horse each day. So normally the way they work, for anybody that hasn't been to one, you'll have like maybe an hour to an hour and a half a day for 3 days. And then usually that's followed up by a little bit of a finale where you sort of show off the finished product. And when you're going along, just because there is not a lot of time, you have to be fairly conscious of how much effort and how much time you put into any one particular thing. So I find that's a real challenge, but it's also kind of what makes it fun and exciting. But once I'm done one round, I'll usually lie awake all night thinking about what I should have done or what I need to do tomorrow or something like that. But as far as what I've learned from them, every single time I've done one, I've learned a lot. It's just more about time management, how to present things in a smooth way to the colt. And that's something that I think sometimes with the colt starting competitions, people think it's that the trainers are rushing. And I mean, I guess a person could, but when it comes down to it, I think what separates people is the person that's the smoothest, because the person that can go through and show the horse something in this calmest, easiest way is going to be the person that helps that colt the most, which is then going to be the colt that does the best. So I think a lot of it comes down to refining out your program, not so much just throwing everything at a young horse.
100%.
And they are, I was going to say, they are really a cool experience to watch. Like, you really go on a journey with the trainers, and I feel like there's very few things that are really cooler than seeing a young horse kind of go through the steps for the first time, and just the thought process that they go through, but how the trainer kind of handles the situations. And I at the end of the day, I actually think it's a pretty emotional journey for a lot of people. They watch this really cool transformation of a horse over a very short amount of time.
Another thing too is I think it's a little different from what most people see, because usually if you go to any kind of a horse event, you're watching the finished product. So if you go to a show jumping, you're watching horses that are trained to jump. If you go to a reining, you're watching finished reiners. When you go to a colt starting, you're watching a horse that doesn't know anything, and you're actually seeing the journey. So it's just kind of a unique experience for a lot of people, and it is a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I totally agree about it kind of being a bit of an emotional experience as you see that trainer and horse kind of develop a bond and begin to understand each other and come through in the end with a totally different connection than they had when they very first met at the beginning of the journey. So definitely a neat experience. Bronwyn, something I wanted to talk to you about. So anybody who's here, both these guys do write for our magazine occasionally. And so this was something that you wrote about in an article of Horse Illustrated, is that you originally started out writing English and then you made the switch to Western. Kind of what was that experience like? And then what advice do you have for anybody that's considering making that switch or any discipline switch?
Yeah. So the way that actually happened, I think I'll just give that short little story is I, with my first paycheck as a radiation therapist, I bought a thoroughbred mare, just for casual riding, just ride around the farm, have a hack or two. And I was riding English at the time. And then my competitive spirit sort of came back, because I was like, oh, she is a good jumper though. I should take her to some shows. And then what happened to pop up was a club show in our local fairgrounds, and they call it the Western Horse Club, basically, a lot of the club shows. So I would say they're very similar to a very small and local AQHA type show. Like, you get a lot of Western people in those shows. Mm-hmm. So I entered the English classes thinking, well, all of these Western horses have English saddles on, so I'm going to kind of like come here and show off my stuff with my thoroughbred mare. And, you know, they asked for the extended trot there, and like she could just really like flick her legs out and stuff. And the quarter horses were going along kind of slow. And I'm like, I feel like I'm doing something wrong here. Anyways, so they do have a different way of judging for sure in those shows. But later in the day, they ended up having barrel racing, and they didn't have a ton of people there. So some of the Western folks were like, would you like to stay around and do the barrel racing and the pole bending? And I was like, sure. And they let you do it in an English saddle. Just, it was for fun. And So I started it, and my mare ended up being really, really keen on it. And it was so much fun to run her like that. So I went home, I called up my old barn, asked if I could buy a Western saddle from them, because I like really had no idea what I was, gonna buy. I felt like my saddle didn't fit for it. And I was like, there must be something about the Western saddle that would change the experience. So, so I started bringing her back to actually just the barrel racing and pole bending, because she started to win a bit, and I was really quite having so much fun in it. And then in Western versus English, I find this part a little different. The Western folks who are in the barrel racing and pole bending tend to have a few horses that they own and compete on, as opposed to, I'll say, in the English world, you may have one like very special horse that you spend all of your time on, maybe two, but it's not uncommon for the Western or the barrel racing ladies to have 3 or 4 horses, So then I had bought a couple young horses, and they weren't started yet. So one was a yearling and one was a weanling. And because I had them all winter long, I was like, what am I going to do with them now? And so I had actually just read The Man Who Listens to Horses, so the Monty Roberts book. And I felt like at that point, this is where my transformation started to happen, was my mindset started to get a little bit more like, I wonder how my horse feels about the training. I wonder if I could read their body language and ask for things differently. And so I started doing a lot of groundwork with them and trying to just more or less see how subtle my cues could be and how smooth I could work with them. And honestly, after a while, I just started to really enjoy thinking of how is the horse enjoying this training and what more could I do? And so when I did start my horses, I actually wanted them to go bridleless in the first 30 days. So I had to be very conscious of my cues and stuff. And I feel like that is part of the Western way, is maybe a little bit different than the English way, is that you're more kind of, I'll say, a little bit more relaxed with the way that you ask for things. You kind of give that horse the responsibility to carry out different motions and maneuvers, as opposed to maybe helping them through all of those things. So with the bridleless doesn't lie. If you don't have good brakes or steering on your horse from your leg cues or from your hand cues that are maybe touching the horse's neck, then things could go bad quick. But but yeah, for anybody else starting out, honestly, I think it's more about educating yourself and just seeing kind of what area you fit into in the Western world. At the end of the day, it is a change of just more or less the change of saddle, but it's also the change of maybe your mindset too, and the way that you look at horsemanship in general. And I feel like that's the part that I took away the most, because I can still sit in an English saddle and ride, but now I feel like I've changed the way that I think as a trainer and a horsewoman.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it gives you, several different perspectives. And as we all know, the mental game is so important when it comes to working with horses. And so it makes sense that aspect played such a huge role in that transition and learning that discipline. Another thing that you guys dabble in is liberty work, and that's something that is continuing to grow in popularity. It really seems like it's taking off. What do you enjoy about liberty, and what would you consider, kind of the benefits of liberty work?
Well, personally, I just think liberty is cool. Like, it's a good time. When you think about it, every corny horse movie anybody's ever seen pretty much has it where somebody's running along and the horse is running with them, and it sparks a lot of imagination. So I think there's just something that draws people to that. Now, if I'm being totally honest, when I was first learning liberty, I found it a little bit frustrating in the beginning, because I would do a few things, then my horse would run away, and then I'd do a few things, and the horse would be with me and then run away again. So the very first part of it was a little bit tricky, but I think if a person kind of sticks with it and gets through that initial stage, once there's a little bit of a connection being developed, all of a sudden the doors kind of swing wide open and there's all these possibilities. So I think it's really fun. Another point is liberty is really, really good for getting a horse's focus. So for instance, if a horse is sort of going through the motions, but not really with you or really connected, a lot of times I think a person can go to liberty training, develop a real connection, and all of a sudden everything else is better. So like, just as an example, one story I'll tell is we had a black mare here that I was starting one time under saddle, and I was going along with her and it was going okay, but I always felt like we were operating at about 65%. It was just we were never getting what I thought was there. And I was getting a little bit frustrated with her at times. So then just for something to do, I stopped riding her for a little bit and played around with Liberty for a couple weeks. And after about 3 or 4 days of it, it was pretty obvious she was really talented in this area. And then we went a little farther with it, and all of a sudden it was obvious she was really, really good at it. And we really had a connection going. And then again, a few weeks later, I went back to riding her, hadn't rode her in a while, got on, and all of a sudden all the stuff that I've been trying to teach her under saddle that I didn't think was sinking in was suddenly just like it magically appeared. And she knew all the stuff. I just wasn't getting her attention and I wasn't getting her focus. So that to me was a real big turning point in my mindset about Liberty training. Another thing with Liberty is, and it's maybe the most important thing, although it's nice for the horse, it's probably the best way to almost force a person to get good at reading horses. Because if a person cannot read a horse well, they're never going to do very well at Liberty. Because with Liberty training, you have to be aware of every little thing that the horse is signaling to you. So for instance, if your horse is looking at you, but then an ear suddenly turns one direction, you know that's where that horse's focus went. So if you don't do something to get their focus back on you, you also know that's probably where they're going to leave you. And I just kind of, again, I don't know if force is the right word, but I mean, if a person's going to be good at Liberty, they have no choice but to get good at reading those little signs. Once you know how to read all those little things, then when you go back to quote unquote regular horse training or regular riding, you're just more in tune with your horse. So you're just automatically better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Go ahead.
I have a couple horses, Chief and Kate, my main 2 horses, and I guess my 3rd horse, Holly, too. It's just really cool when you do know Liberty and they're able to do Liberty. There is a very special connection you do feel with them. Like there is part of you, a lot of creativity can come out because you're like, what if I put these 2 moves together? What do I get? And when you do have a foundation of Liberty, it's really interesting how a horse can read different signals and start to put out different moves as well. So for instance, I have a Spanish walk on my 1 mare, and commercial was asking, do you have a horse that would reach out and shake somebody's hand? And so in about 5 minutes, I had her doing that because all I did then was put her on a stop cue and ask her to reach forward just with 1 leg. And it was pretty cool, like just how a horse can really understand that. Like she could shake a hand after 5 minutes because she had a good foundation in Liberty. So
one other thing with Liberty, though, I do find people sometimes get just a little bit lost in it because they're so, and this is a good thing, but they really want a connection. But sometimes I think they just look at it as magical and it will just miraculously happen. And training a Liberty horse is no different than training anything else. Like if you want to train a reining horse, you have to put a good solid reining foundation on that horse. And it's the same thing with Liberty. You have to know how to put certain cues on and what things to look for and how to put that training base on. It's not that you just go out one day and run around with your horse. There's quite a bit to it, but it is really rewarding if a person wants to put the time and effort into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense because, as we were talking about when we first started talking about Liberty, it's this magical thing you see in the movies. So you think, oh, you can run out there and do that with your horse easily, right? But at the end of the day, you need some sort of training foundation with anything you do with the horse. But yeah, Liberty does seem like a wonderful way to establish a deeper connection with the animal. So obviously we talked about clinics and demos and expos, but I of course want to talk about your TV show, the Horse Trainers. How did that kind of come to be, and what has that experience been like?
Well, there was a period there where a company in Canada bought the rights to show RFD TV and the Cowboy Channel in Canada. So they were also looking around for a horse training show that was put on by Canadians. So at the exact same time, coincidentally, we were hunting around for a TV show opportunity. So we sort of crossed paths, and it was kind of an obvious fit. So we got together and did that. I will say, though, it was quite a challenge at the start because we started this during COVID times. So we were messaging back and forth and phoning back and forth with the main company, and they were interested, but like everything else, all things in the world were kind of up in the air at the moment. So we were going back and forth in the spring of 2020, and then it just kind of petered out. So it just kind of fell away. Well, then in the fall of 2020, all of a sudden the folks at the company just reappeared, and they're like, do you still want to do this? We're like, sure. We thought it was gone. And then they're like, great, we need a whole bunch of episodes and we need them next month. And they're kind of, oh no. So we were really on the spot, but we wanted to do it bad. And I remember I was on the phone with the CEO, I believe it was, and he said, you realize though, because this is COVID, we can't send out a film crew. So you guys are going to have to do all the filming and all that type of stuff yourselves. And we're like, okay. And he's like, you'll have to be your own producer. And I didn't want to lose it. So I'm like, sure, no problem. And then there's kind of an awkward silence. Then I was like, what does a producer do? And then he kind of had to explain that to me. So we end up putting it together, and we had to make, I think, 18 episodes and learn how to do it ourselves. And we only had like a month to do it because, again, it was late fall. So winter was coming when we were going to lose our time. So we kind of put that together, and then really it just kind of kept rolling. We sort of got our groove, and just the company kept renewing with us every time. So we're up to, we've done 9 seasons, and I think we've got over 120 episodes out there. Yeah. And then we're about to start filming for season 10 here, probably in the next month or so. So it's been fun. It was definitely a steep learning curve though in the beginning. There were times that we were a little bit exasperated, but we're very happy we went ahead and did it.
Wow, I had no idea that was how it all started, and what a huge undertaking, but obviously it's paid off. Are you guys still having to do it that way, or have things kind of changed?
We still do it. We still do it that way. One reason is just with film crews and such, we're like kind of isolated up here where we are. We're a few hours from Toronto. So we're just in the middle of basically nowhere by ourselves. So we kind of do it that way. Also, just because we know what we want to show. Like if we're showing a training maneuver, we know the best angles and such to show people how to get it done. So I think that there would be too big of a learning curve for somebody else to maybe learn all of like, oh, shoot it from this angle, or, get this side. And so, yeah, we do it like that. It kind of works for us. It's handy, but it is a lot of work. But always where there's a will, there's a way, honestly.
Sure.
I would say another thing too is we almost in a way have to do it ourselves, just because we'll be on the road doing clinics or expos or whatever. And then you get home and the next week it's raining every day and stuff like that. So we have to really time it when it works. So it's very hard to schedule when we actually film.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And so is the point of, if a camera person maybe isn't a horse person, they're not going to know exactly how to show things or the best way to show things. So I think that's really impressive that you guys do it all on your own, in addition to being the stars of the show, the ones teaching on the show and all of that. So kudos to you. That's a lot of work, but obviously it's continuing to do very well. So that's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So when it comes to any of these avenues, whether that's your clinics, demos, or the TV show itself, and this is kind of a broad question, but what do you consider the most important takeaways for those who are learning from your teachings?
I would say the biggest thing is to put a really rock solid foundation on a horse. I think it's very easy to just pick a maneuver or pick one skill and try to put that on a horse. But if the horse doesn't have a really solid training foundation, almost always the wheels fly off somewhere. So it's one of those things that everybody says about foundation, but at the same time, I still don't think they realize how important it is. So we really, really try to emphasize, get that foundation really, really in place. And then from there, it's really not that hard. I shouldn't say it's not that hard, but it's not that hard to add the really advanced maneuvers or fix problems that a person's running into, because you can always just keep falling back on that base. But if you have a horse that doesn't have a real solid base and you run into a problem, there's almost nothing to fall back on. So it's like, if that's in place, I think usually you're in pretty good shape. The hard stuff isn't that hard, and the problems aren't that tricky.
Mm-hmm. And when you're teaching a horse, like all horses learn differently. And so what may work for one horse may not work for another. So you have to be pretty adaptable in the way that you teach horses, and consider that you are teaching them every time you're with them. So whether you're doing a good job or not a good job, they're going to learn something out of that experience. And I think that it's just be adaptable yourself. Don't get stuck in like a mold that you have to do it a certain way, that you're pretty open to just allowing the horse to be himself, and you can help him with where he's at.
We always say with the training, we have a plan, but it's always a loose knit plan. So if we're going along and the horse is just showing in one area that they don't quite get that, usually we have plan B and plan C and plan D. Like we've usually got a lot of different options that we can show folks, just because again, with the clinics, we run into such a huge variety of horses. We'll be doing a clinic and one person will be there on a pony and a few people are riding quarter horses and somebody else is riding a Clydesdale. So you have to have a lot of different ways to come at a situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, they're all individuals, they're all different, just like people. And so you got to have those different approaches. But if you had any advice to give for aspiring horsemen, what would it be?
There's a lot to learn, honestly.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of, honestly, you have to be a jack of all trades in this business. Like for us, we've had to learn, it's not only your horse training, but it's also like your computer stuff, your video stuff. You have to be able to be a very adaptable person. And I think as far as the horse training goes, train as many horses as you can and get as much experience as you can, because I feel like sometimes people will maybe own one horse and then, want to teach what they know about the one horse, which is fine, but you have to have a variety of experiences. And I think you have to learn from a lot of different people and a lot of different styles of training as well.
And just kind of build off that, I think it's really, really important to understand that this is a skill set, because sometimes I'll run into folks and they'll say about a particular person, they're just a real natural with horses, or they're gifted, or they something along that line. And it's like, that's all great. I'm not taking away from it. But at the same time, I really wouldn't want to go to a doctor that's, if I said, where'd you go to school? And they're like, oh, I was just gifted with this, and now I'm going to do open heart surgery on you. It's something that a person really, really has to make a conscious effort to learn this as a trade. So it's very easy to, and I'm guilty of this myself. If I go along too long without trying to learn something new, I'll find myself sliding into a little bit of a rut. So I'm constantly trying to get more information or experiment a little bit more, find another technique, tweak it a little bit, see if I can do something a little bit different. But I think a person really has to treat this as a profession and go at it like they're going to learn everything they can. And kind of to build off what Bronwyn said, you can't do that on 2 or 3 horses. So if you can get on a lot of horses, I would sure recommend that, because you can learn how a particular horse operates, but until you've worked with hundreds of them, you really don't have that ability to come to a new, interact with a brand new horse and be able to read him really quickly. That's a skill set all in its own. So once a person has worked with a ton of them, usually then they can be handed a new horse, fiddle around with them for a couple minutes, and have a pretty good idea where that horse is coming from and why he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's forever a learning experience. There's always more to learn with each horse, I'm sure. But obviously you guys have been around horses pretty much your whole life. So I know it can be kind of difficult to narrow down. But do you have any standout memories or moments that you've experienced with horses?
Sure. I think for like us as a couple, our one standout was definitely Canada's Got Talent. It was just such a unique experience. And I always wanted to do something very special with my horses, Chief and Kate, and I bought them both from Jason. So so when we trained them at Liberty, and I've taken them to a ton of rodeos and barrel racing and pole bending, and we've just had like, they've seen so much of the world, I'll say, our world anyhow. And when we took them there, we just couldn't be prouder of a couple horses that they just basically left their heart on the stage too. They really, I don't know.
Came through.
It's emotional because it was a really special day. So, yeah.
And I guess this is indirectly my most important experience with a horse is I met Bronwyn. So
there you go.
I was there one day in the barn and the phone rang and I picked it up, and this lady was asking about a black mare that we had for sale. So she ended up buying it over the phone, and then she came out a while later to see about another one, and turned out to be Bronwyn. So I guess that's where I could say my most important point that horses led me to was.
It's a good answer. Good answer.
Horses have led us to our whole life almost.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow down.
Yeah, so many opportunities.
Yeah, it's amazing when horses are so integrated with your life, where they can take you and how they can shape your life for sure. Kind of one of the last questions I have for you guys before we head into some audience questions is, can you give us some insight into anything exciting that may be coming up for you guys? I know you mentioned you should be on to the 10th season of your shows soon, but anything else?
Yeah, we just we did a horse expo here a couple weeks ago in Ontario, and we're headed out. I believe Thursday we're going to Alberta to Horse Expo Canada out there in Red Deer. So both of us are doing several clinics there, which is always a good time. Personally, the newest thing that I have on the go is I wrote a book on colt starting that will be released here shortly. It's kind of pre-released right now, but it'll be coming out with Trafalgar here before too long. And then we have some expos lined up to the fall. I guess I better not announce which ones yet because they're supposed to release here before too long. So I might jump the gun on that one. But other than that, we have a pretty full clinic schedule that we're working away on at the moment. And then we'll probably be adding some more clinics to it before too long.
Very exciting. You guys definitely keep busy.
We always have goals and dreams. So there's always something up around the corner. And with our own horses, we just continue to keep working on them and, put neater tricks on, and maybe Black Beauty will come calling someday.
No, that's awesome. I mean, obviously, you guys have just continued to keep growing your business and what you do. And again, I'm just so impressed that you guys completely produce and film the show yourself. That's awesome. And, obviously with all these different events you go to, people have plenty to learn from you guys, as well as, that obviously your book's coming up, Jason, which is super exciting. And we love all of your contributions to our magazine as well. I know you just shared the other day your most recent article in Horse Illustrated. So definitely everybody check that out if you haven't already. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and head into some audience questions. So those of you out here, again, that Q&A button, you can just type in your questions there and I'll ask them on your behalf. We do have a couple of pre-submitted questions from followers, so I'll ask a couple of those while we wait on others to come in. Bella was wondering, what is it like teaching via a television show versus at an in-person clinic?
Well, in the very beginning, it was absolutely terrible, being honest. Because what happens is at an expo or a clinic or something like that, there's crowd interaction. So if I say something to somebody and they stare at me blankly, I know that probably what I said didn't sink in, so I know to rephrase it. Or if everybody kind of nods or laughs or something like that, I know that they've probably paid attention to what I just said. When we started filming the show, I thought it would be really easy because I was used to talking to big groups of people. In reality, it was really hard though, because you would say something to the camera and then you'll be self-conscious and I'd be like, did that sound all right? Should I say it again? Do you think anybody understood what I was talking about? So sometimes when I do it, I'll get tongue-tied and have to repeat the same thing 3 or 4 times. But it's like anything else. Once you get rolling with something, you kind of find your groove and away it goes. But I would say with the television thing, the main thing is you almost have to get ahead of what you think people will be wanting to ask about. So we'll maybe show a maneuver, but then I'll say, you may run into this problem or this problem, and here's how you would solve that. So you try to get ahead of the curve on that one.
And I think just going off the wording of loosely knit plan, sometimes when we go out, we'll have a certain topic in mind, and that's not what it turns into at all, because the horse will lead the way. The horse will say, no, this is what I need today. So then we ended up, going through what the horse actually needs that day. So our topics tend to kind of change on a whim if we need to, and so that we can show more true to life scenarios as well.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think I needed to learn how to roll with it a little bit more. In the beginning, I would be a little bit too scripted, and then the horse would need me to really work on something else that day. So then I had to learn to sort of adapt. But at the same time, I swear every time we turn on that camera, something crazy goes on. We had the one day we had it going, and then like a dust devil, like a little tornado thing, all of a sudden appeared, picked up our camera and threw it away, and we had to go get it. So we had that happen. And then I think everybody that lives within 20 miles of us, the moment we turn a camera on, they fire up every piece of machinery they have and honk every horn and stuff like that. So we always somehow end up having a problem. But
we have a lot of blooper reels. Let's just
I was going to say, I bet you have a great blooper reel.
Yeah, there's some funny stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, naturally, right? Brielle is asking, she said, as far as Liberty work goes, do you recommend already having a horse gentled before starting any Liberty work? She asked because she works with wild Mustangs and she has a Mustang right now that she's working with that was previously owned, then ended up back with the BLM to be sold again. So she's got some major trauma from the previous owner and she's just trying to rebuild her trust in humans through her.
Okay, so I have two totally different answers for that question.
Okay.
If a person is typically going to learn Liberty, I'll usually say that Liberty does not fix a lot of problems, but it reveals a lot of problems. So I usually say, like, get your horse pretty gentle and do a groundwork foundation on them first. And then I look at Liberty as being the icing on the cake. So the groundwork is more important, and then the Liberty really puts the polish on and then helps develop that big connection. Having said that, I know this person's coming at it from a little different angle. Yes, Liberty can be taught to a horse that knows absolutely nothing. So I have had horses come in that are 100% wild. And to be honest, I can't even get a halter on them to do groundwork with them. So it's barely an option. So I will go ahead and start right with Liberty. And the difference is, though, your Liberty skills as a trainer have to be a whole lot better to come at it from that angle, just because you don't have that groundwork base to fall back on. So your Liberty has to be really, really in tune. So if this person, I don't know them, but if they have not already done Liberty, I would suggest work with some other horses that are a little quieter, teach them Liberty first, get a feel for it, and then go ahead and work on the wild one from there. And then what I would say is, though, once they get pretty darn handy with Liberty, then yeah, I would probably go ahead and start working with that wild one. Or if they are pretty good at Liberty, yes, go ahead and start with it. I would say, though, be very aware that when you start with Liberty with one that's really wild, be aware of little escapes. Sometimes what will happen is things will start to work, but then they'll start to find little holes where they can maybe run away from you and stuff like this. So you really, really have to be aware of small trends at Liberty when you're working with a wild one, because they can learn little escapes there as well.
Makes sense. Madison is asking, for someone who has sport horses but very little Liberty experience, where is a good place to start when it comes to Liberty training?
There, I would say the glue that really ties Liberty together is having it where you're a giant magnet for your horse. So the whole thing that makes it work is your horse has to be thinking about being with you all the time. And then what works from there is you send the horse away from you, but then the horse has to be thinking about, when can I get back to that person? So even when you shove them out, they need to be thinking about coming back again. So I would say a big part of it is start working on calling your horse to you. So I'll have like a voice cue, like I'll maybe use the word here, and I'll maybe put the horse on a long line, and I'll say here, back up, and then reel the line in and reel the horse up to me. Once it comes up to me, I'll kind of rub and pet on them. Another thing I'll do is have a line that's maybe 6 feet between you and the horse. So leave about 6 foot in the lead rope. I'll back away from my horse, and whichever way my horse looks, I will go the opposite direction. And I'll just keep doing that again and again. And every time they look one way, I'll go the other way. Well, after a few minutes, the horse stops looking away. They start looking really at the handler, because they're like, where are you going to go now? And I got to follow you. And they get really in sync with you. So that's a really easy way to get started. It's not going to take you the whole way, but it's a quick little exercise that will start kind of get you on the right track. Another thing is that with a Liberty horse, when they're with you, you have to be very pleasant, and you have to be a really nice place to be. So if they come up to you, they need to rest with you, and you maybe kind of rub and pet on them a little bit and make them enjoy being with you. Don't do very much backing up. So for instance, if I was to call a Liberty horse towards me and it came up to me and I rub and pet on it, I'm not going to then back it away from me, because I don't want the last thing that horse is thinking about is getting away from me. I want them thinking about coming to me. On that same note, though, this is why it's a good idea to have good ground manners on your horse first, because if you have them coming to you and then they're pushy and maybe a little bit rude, they're going to be coming right on top of you. So that's why the groundwork skills are so important.
And then just one little side tip, don't take them off the halter and lead too early, because it's really hard to fix the running away problem. So do your training program with them on the lead. And then, to be honest, even just take a rope, throw it around their neck when you first let them go, and make sure that they are going to stay with you. That way you have a little bit of kind of an idea if you're going to have to do a little bit more training on them to, again, create that magnet effect for them.
Yeah. And just kind of on that, not to harp on it too long, but I think sometimes with Liberty, people make, I won't say it's a mistake, but they're thinking too much about their horse being loose from the very beginning. I would rather teach them some of the things like coming to me with the line on them. And then when I turn them loose, it's pretty darn easy to then call them up to me while they're loose. But a lot of times I'll have somebody say about my horse does Liberty, and then when they go to show it to me, they're turning their horse loose in a round pen or arena, just chasing them around a lot. And being totally honest, you could take anybody with no training experience and hand them a training stick and say, chase your horse. That's not very hard. There's not really much connection going on there. Mm-hmm. So I would rather folks think about leave the halter and lead on, teach them the cues, then let them go. And you already have a horse that's halfway towards being a Liberty horse before you ever let them go.
Sure. Yeah. This question from Jenny kind of builds on that. She's asked, for someone new to Liberty, what cues do you start with, and would that change if you had a saddle broke horse or not? So for example, in riding, you may start with go, stop, or steering, things like that.
Mm-hmm. In Liberty, in the beginning, really what you're starting with is a come cue. And we use basically a lunge whip or 2 lunge whips to create just a really big kind of cue. The reason that we're using them is eventually we want that horse to work farther and farther from us. So we're creating like a really big kind of, I guess, cue so they can see us from far away. So come cue and stop cue. So the stop cue for us is 2 whips in the air. And basically, if you have the come cue and stop cue, you can put them almost anywhere. And then you have a horse that'll come up to you and one that'll stop halfway up or right up to you. And those are the 2 main cues that we put on. Then we start putting on some steering, which is a little bit trickier, I'll say, but we tend to steer if we're going around in a circle or something along that line. We steer with the inside whip or the your inside hand cue, so that that horse, it would be too awkward to reach around them and kind of do like a paddle per se. So yeah, you got to keep them on the inside and have your steering on the inside of the horse.
And yeah, just to kind of build off what Bronwyn said, the come to you cue is the most important one. The stop cue is really big. That's extremely important. And then with the circling, the way that we start teaching a horse to circle at Liberty is we'll send them out away from us just a little bit and then immediately call them back. And then a little bit more the next time, then immediately call them back. And that's sort of the invisible lunge line that keeps them coming back to you at Liberty, is that you don't let them out for very long. So in the beginning, I would not ask a horse to circle around me 2 times. I would just maybe go like a quarter of a circle and call them back, and then half a circle and call them back. And eventually they'll go out and they're thinking about coming back so much, they just don't leave. That's why a lot of times if you watch a Liberty horse going around, their body will be in a different shape than lunging. In lunging, usually the body will be curved on the shape of the circle. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, so at Liberty, if this is the head, you'll notice the head will be curved in a little bit more, and it's because the horse is going around looking at the trainer and they really have their focus. And so that's something that I like to see in the beginning, is seeing one with a lot of curve through their body. Then I know that horse is really focused on me. Once the horse becomes a little bit more trained, then usually they'll straighten out a little bit more, just because they know what's going on. They don't feel that need to kind of like over focus on me.
Gotcha. That's interesting. Makes sense. Hannah asked, she'd like to start try to start her own young horse. And obviously every horse is different, but from a broad standpoint, what is the most important thing to keep in mind when starting a young horse?
Well, chapter 277 on that one. Okay, so as far as main points, hands down, the most important point is stay safe. I think sometimes people do not allow for the fact that they're working with a horse that is experiencing a lot of things for the very first time. So for instance, if you take an older horse and you get on them and they're maybe feeling a little fresh that day and being a little silly, if it's a trained horse that you probably know they're just goofing around, and if you kind of work through it, you'll be okay. Whereas with a young horse, when you crawl on it for the first time, even if you've done a lot of preparation, you've done a very, very good job, you still are the first person that's gotten on that horse, and you don't know, maybe that colt's going to look at it as, hey, a mountain lion just got on me, even though maybe you have a really good relationship on the ground. So I think, I mean, you can't take that away 100%, but really try to cover all the steps you can on the ground before you think about getting on. Another thing is, I think you'd have to make an honest evaluation of yourself. Whoever gets on for the first time has to be somebody that can be calm and cool. So I like to make the point that when you're working with a young horse that's learning about being ridden for the first few times, ideally, I would like both of you to be calm, but at minimum, one of you has to be. So if you have a nervous rider getting on a horse that's maybe going to be in a little bit of a nervous situation, that's kind of oil and water. There needs to be somebody in the equation that's going to kind of lead the two of you through this. So I think it's something like you need to say to yourself, can I be calm if things are going to be just a little bit quick? Sometimes when you get on a colt for the first few times, they'll tend to move a little bit abruptly. So they'll go really slow and then they'll go really quick for a few steps, and then they'll slow right down and then go really quick for a few steps. So you need to be able to really go with that colt, even if they're being just a little bit all over the place. Another thing you can do too is obviously get them used to being saddled and bridled and that type of thing. But we like to do some exercises that we call riding from the ground. So it would be hard to explain them in great detail here, but I would like to have it where I can pick up on the reins on either side and have it where that horse would turn real soft on the ground before I ever got on that horse for the first time. Another thing is I would like them to back up from the bridle really well before I ever get on, because if you teach a good backup from the ground, you've kind of taught the stop as well. Because if a horse is going forward and then goes into a backup, there had to be a stop in there somewhere. So if you put those riding from the ground cues on first, you're going to have some steering when you get on that horse, and then things are probably going to go a lot better for you. Another thing is really be aware of those signals your horse is giving you. So if you do something, but you notice that that horse is really tight and really tense, that's a pretty strong sign you need to spend longer on that, or think about repeating that step for a few more days before you ever think about getting on. But if I had a young horse, if I went through all the steps with it, but I was thinking about getting on, but I could see that it was tight and tense, I am not getting on. That's just something I don't need to be a part of. Another thing is work through as many, this kind of is maybe the same thing, but be aware of any little areas your horse has been a little bit tougher in, and overemphasize those areas. So for instance, if you put the saddle pad on and your horse is a little bit spooky, put it on and off 30 times until that horse is 100% A-okay with it. Don't ever try to sneak through anything with colt starting, because if you just kind of skirt through, that will kind of catch you somewhere else. You need to be thinking about, how can I do whatever it is you're working on until this horse is 100, or I shouldn't say 100%, but 99.999% accepting of that step before you move on to the next step.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that wraps up all the questions that we have. So thank you everybody for submitting them. And of course, Jason and Bronwyn, thank you so much for your time. I think everything we talked about today was super valuable, and obviously it was lots of fun to learn more about you guys. And of course, this recording will also be posted tomorrow for everybody else who couldn't be here today to enjoy. But just again, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed it and appreciated it.
Thank you so much for the invite. It was lots of fun to chat.
Yeah, this was really nice. I had a great time.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.